The Royals still have an issue with their leadoff hitter, but I have someone who could make a little bit of sense. I'll tell you who in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, we're on Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you are a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, well, I'm based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. And that's for my day job. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Now, today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. And again, those terms apply. Royals were off tonight, so didn't really have a sense of urgency, at least on my end, to get an episode out before the game so you could watch that, or we didn't have a game to recap. So really was just hoping to get this out whenever I had the spare time to. And, I thought for a little bit that maybe I was just going to do this one in the morning and then also follow up with the Mailbag Friday in the afternoon. But with the Royals playing at 5:40 tomorrow, I didn't think I'd be able to get it done in a timely manner. So still doing a little bit of a later episode tonight, basically over the stuff that we were teasing in Wednesday's episode about the leadoff hitter, about this wild card spot, and a little bit of a preview into this Cincinnati series. So to kick things off, I think it is fitting because the leadoff hitter does kick things off for this lineup and will be the first batter of the game tomorrow. I think it is clear to understand that the leadoff position is not going to be completely solved this year, mainly because I don't think there is a great leadoff hitter on this team. We have seen Michael Massey have some good performances at the top of the order. We saw Maikel Garcia get demoted from the leadoff spot, then come back and lead off a few times. Overall, though, nothing's really stuck. Adam Frazier had a 3-hit game on Wednesday, but Adam Frazier's not the answer because Adam Frazier doesn't play every single day. What it's going to come down to, I think, in the end, is matchup-based, right? There could be a different leadoff hitter depending on who's throwing that day. If it's a left-hander, you'll probably see Maikel Garcia. If it's a right-hander, you'll probably see Michael Massey. But I have thought to myself a little bit as to who would make some sense. And I know that Freddie Fermin was a popular choice when he was really starting to thrive in his 9-10 game hitting streak. It wasn't that long ago. And then he got put in the leadoff spot, didn't get on base, and he's been in a little bit of a cold slump as of late. So I never really thought Freddie Fermin was the answer. I think it was worth a shot, but Matt Quatraro only gave it one game, and that's fine because maybe they just don't view, a guy like Freddie Fermin as the top of the order player because he's also not quick, right? Catchers leading off, that isn't really a strategy for many teams out there. And Maikel Garcia and Michael Massey feel like the two likeliest options. If Michael Massey has his back flare up, well, then Adam Frazier seemingly steps into that role as the left-handed bat to face the righties in the lineup. But I have pitched this idea to a few people, not anybody within the Royals organization, more so with friends and buddies and coworkers, of MJ Melendez getting a chance to lead off again. And before anybody harshly pushes back on it, I think it is going to be a little bit of a thought out process here. I really want to collect my words, find the reasons why this makes a little bit of sense, but also play devil's advocate to myself because I believe that's a smart way about going about things. I'm not going to give you a point and say there's no issues, there's no flaws, because if there were no issues and there were no flaws, MJ Melendez would be leading off for this team. I think when you look at splits over a player's career, there's a couple different factors you have to weigh. Usually one I don't pay attention to is a guy's average in a certain spot in the lineup, because that can vary, I think, a little bit. Sometimes when you're hitting 5th, 6th, and 7th, it's total randomness. But I do believe you can look at a guy leading off a game and look at those stats and take them a little bit seriously. So MJ Melendez this year has had quite a wild ride. Let's call it at that. He started off the season incredible, then went through one of the coldest stretches anybody in baseball had this year. And then he slowly started to turn things on, sprained his ankle, missed some time, came back. And since then, I think has been doing just fine. I think MJ Melendez is starting to rebound and have a really good second half. But I look at the splits that he's had in his career, and I think this will surprise a few people that he has hit in every spot in the lineup. Started the game in every spot but ninth. He's also pinch hit late in the game in the ninth spot, but he's never started a game in the 9 hole. He has started 3 games in the 8 hole. He has started 44 games in the 7 hole, 40 in the 6 hole, 89 in the 5th hole. He has 56 starts in the cleanup spot, 34 batting third, 13 starts batting second, and 77 starts leading off the game. We remember that in 2022 when MJ was still catching, the Royals tried that out for a little bit. But then I go to the numbers here and where MJ really shines, where he does it. And I'll be quite honest with you, there's not really a spot in the order that he thrives at an unbelievable level. But for me, I'm going off of track record because Adam Frazier has been leading off games because he's done it before. And the reason I think they were so reluctant with Freddie Fermin is he hadn't done it before, right? He had not led off a game before. MJ Melendez has 77 starts when leading off a game. And his on-base percentage is .318. If I were to stack that up against all the other spots, you take out the 9 hole because he's never started a game there. You go to the 8 hole, sure, you could make sense of it, but he has 10 plate appearances in the 8 hole, and he's got a .400 on-base percentage. So I take the next 2 closest, and that would be the 5th hole and the leadoff spot. Remember, he's got 89 starts in the 5th hole, and he's got 77 leading off a game. He's got a .319 OBP batting 5th, and he's got a .318 OBP leading off. After that, he's got a .303 batting 6th, and then every other spot in the order, he is below 300 with the on-base percentage. I go to the OPS, right? Batting 6th and batting 5th. He's got a .789 OPS and .744, but the leadoff spot, it's .706. So I think there is some information you could go off of that would make sense for MJ Melendez to lead off a game. Now, those are just basic stats, right? And MJ Melendez has not been the model for consistency this year. Really, he's caught in fire of late. But here's where I'll play devil's advocate and why I think it may in the end not make sense. We always seem to believe that when a player hits well, the obvious answer is, well, move them up in the order. Or when a guy is not hitting well, you demote them. This year, we have really seen one demotion. And correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Maikel Garcia got bumped from the 1st spot in the order down to about the 7 of the 8 hole. So no longer leading off games, had a little bit of a reset, caught fire. It worked out well for him for the most part. Everybody else has stayed the same. Bobby Witt Jr. hits 2nd. Vinny hits 3rd. I remember early on in the year it was, well, you need to move Vinny down. Mac Quatrero never did. Salvador Perez always cleans up. The 5th hole, kind of bounced back and forth between Melendez, Massey, and Renfroe. But the top 3 guys, they've stayed the same all year long. But we haven't really seen a true demotion where a guy always hit there and then got moved down. And for the guys that had been thriving, right, Hunter Renfroe, MJ Melendez of late, Freddie Fermin. Freddie Fermin got the bump to the leadoff spot, is kind of tossing him a bone, but then never after that. And so they moved him back down to the 6th and the 7th hole. Hunter Renfroe was one of the Royals' hottest hitters, but never got bumped up to the 2 hole or the 3 hole or the 4 hole. He never went higher than 5th, unless there was some lineup in which Salvi wasn't playing and you could clean up Hunter Renfroe. I'm trying to remember if he hit 4th in any of the games this year, not to my memory. So there is that philosophy of, yeah, you reward a guy for hitting well. Hey, you don't need to be hitting 9th anymore. Let's try you at the top of the order. Then Kyle Isbell was, people were clamoring to get him higher up in the order, but Mac Quatrero and the coaching staff said, look, he's comfortable there. He's hitting there. And we don't want to mess that up. And that would be my devil's advocate for not leading off MJ Melendez. He's just started to find rhythm again. Do you want to put that pressure on him of being the leadoff guy? Well, maybe it wouldn't make too much sense, but I do think as a guy who's hitting well and whose player profile projects to be somebody who would provide you some pop at the top of the order. When he's hitting well, he can see some pitches. He can have a good walk rate. He's not walking as much as he did last year, but I do think it gives you some value at the top of the order, especially when you're running Adam Frazier out there and Maikel Garcia and Michael Massey. Now, if Massey's the runaway favorite because he's hit better of late from the leadoff spot, so be it. Don't need to make a move on that front. But I think with MJ's athleticism, we've seen him swipe a couple of bags before. He's a good base runner. He's above average in that department in the sprint speed area of his base running skills. He's got power, 20 to 25 home run power. He can go the other way. And I think he's been one of the hotter hitters in this lineup. So for me, I think there's a guy that has leadoff experience, has, I think, more upside at that spot than Adam Frazier could give you, or maybe even Michael Massey could give you. And he's got speed. He's got athletic enough speed where if Bobby Witt Jr. were to hit one in the gap, he can score from first, right? He can score on a one hopper to the outfield from second base. And I don't think really Michael Massey or Adam Frazier could. I think him and Maikel Garcia are kind of interchangeable. I think Garcia is a much better base runner in terms of stealing bases, but speed-wise, I think MJ Melendez is deceptively fast, and he's done this before. He's led off before, but the question becomes, when he's finally found that rhythm and that confidence, do you just keep him there and let him continue to hit and have protection in the lineup, or put that pressure of, hey, we want to try this out? I don't believe this leadoff spot is going to be solved, but if we're going to be experimental, I wouldn't hate seeing MJ Melendez at the top of the order in one of these games in Cincinnati. But I'm not the manager. They've got their reasons. I have mine. We'll take our first break of the show. When we come back, it was a damn good night for the Royals in the wild card spot. And I'm going to look a little bit further into this end of the August schedule, end of September, and why I'm gaining more and more confidence this dream season can actually make its way into October. We'll dive into it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our title sponsor in Game Time. Though the Royals are in Cincinnati, they've got a homestand coming up against the Los Angeles Angels. That'll kick off on Monday, I believe it is, a 3-game series against an Angels team that they saw in Anaheim all the way back in June, I believe it was. It was May or June. Feels like forever ago. It's an Angels team that's not playing well, and tickets will be affordable to go to that game as the Royals continue to make their wild card push and division push at that. So maybe a perfect opportunity to take the family out, take your boyfriend, your girlfriend out, your grandparents, and watch the Royals play some baseball at Kauffman Stadium. But buy your tickets over at Game Time. It's my favorite spot to go and buy tickets, whether it be a sporting event, a concert, a comedy show. They got you all covered over there. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Tonight, as we mentioned, the Royals did not play. If you're watching this podcast, you already knew they didn't play tonight. But it didn't mean it was a lazy off day or it was a unproductive off day, because it was a damn productive day for the Royals in terms of the wild card race. And there's nothing better when you win right before an off day, and then when that off day happens, you just watch the teams that are chasing you collapse, or they lose a game, or they blow a game. It just feels that much sweeter because you didn't do anything. You didn't have to do anything. We played as many baseball games today as the Royals did, and yet they gained ground in the wild card race. As I am doing this episode, the Royals hold a 3.5 game lead over the Seattle Mariners, and they now have a 3-game lead, a 2.5 game lead over the Boston Red Sox before they've even began their series in Cincinnati. So the complete wild card breakdown here, starting things off on the American League side, is Baltimore at the top. They beat Boston tonight. They have a 5-game lead in the wild card race over Kansas City. Minnesota is 3.5 games back of Baltimore for that top wild card spot. They beat the Rangers tonight, and the Royals are the final wild card team at 66-55. I said a 2.5. They have a 2-game lead. Or no, it is a 2.5 game lead. MLB app hasn't updated just yet. So a 2.5 game lead for the Royals over Boston, a 3.5 game lead over Seattle, who's now in a 3-game losing streak. And then you get the Tampa Bay, who's 6.5 back. Detroit is 7.5 back. Toronto's 9. And the Rangers now 10 games back in the wild card race. So it really feels like a 3-team race at this point. And I feel like we have mentioned that on the show before. I have been focusing on Seattle and Boston, and those were the 2 teams I was focusing on tonight. I checked in on the Twins and Rangers game, but to me, the Twins and Royals race will take care of itself if the Royals keep winning. If they don't, my focus is going to stay completely zeroed in on Boston and Seattle. And Boston has 3 more games in Baltimore this weekend. Seattle will head to Pittsburgh to take on a Pirates team that has lost 10 in a row. But Paul Skeens throws tomorrow night for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, Logan Gilbert does go for the Mariners. Still, a series in which you feel like the odds could be in favor of the Pirates because they've lost 10 in a row. You feel like they're due for at least a win or 2. So Seattle could be going into a situation that's not as favorable as you may think it is. But then after that, when the Royals come home and they take on the Los Angeles Angels, the Boston Red Sox will then go to Houston. So they're going from Baltimore to Houston. The Astros have been red hot. They are kind of starting to pull away in the American League West. And then you look at the Twins. If you're into that, they're going to face the hottest team in baseball in the Padres in San Diego. And then you look at the Mariners. They're going to LA to take on the Dodgers. So a really, really, really good opportunity for the Royals going into this weekend because Boston has an absolute gauntlet that they're going through right now. They are going to have to worry about, at maybe most at this point, splitting with the Orioles, taking 2 of the final 3, but just trying to make sure they don't lose that series or get swept. But if they don't win that series, they got to turn things around and go to Houston, who they just saw at Fenway Park and got swept by. The Mariners have to try and make sure that losing streak extends in Pittsburgh, but after that, they have to go to Dodger Stadium, take on Ohtani, take on Betts, take on Freeman, and they've been in Milwaukee struggling, facing that Brewers bullpen. So they're going to be looking to take it out on somebody. And the Royals will go and play the Reds, who have been playing well of late. They're just 4 games back in the wild card race, but then they play a bad Angels team. So where they're at right now, with a cushy, I'll call it that, 2.5 game lead over Boston and a 3.5 game lead over Seattle, this is a good stretch before that ruthless stretch of play they'll have in which they face Cleveland, they'll face Minnesota, they'll face Houston, they'll face the Phillies, they'll face the Yankees. It's going to get tough. But this is another golden opportunity of taking advantage when Boston and Seattle are facing really good teams. Because there's going to come a time in which the Royals are facing a good team, have a 3-game series, a 4-game series, and Seattle or Boston is going to have one of those gimmies, going to have one of those softer schedules, one of those softer series that'll be in front of them. But still, with 40 to 41 games to go, the Royals are in a damn good spot. And I know there's a lot of factors here. I know the rotation could run out of gas in mid-September. I know the bullpen is a group you just don't really trust all the time, and probably more often than not. The offense can be hit and miss from time to time. You know, you'd think with some of the guys in that lineup, hey, you bring a AAA guy up, you should be able to torch him. Well, it didn't happen in Minnesota. Louis Varland, for the most part, looked good. And then you had, I'm already blanking on the kid's name, Zebby Matthews was really good on Tuesday night, and Seth Lugo got shelled. So there are factors there that make you doubt this team. But I'll also bring up the fact that the teams chasing the Royals have their own issues as well. That's always one thing that we do in sports is, well, I'm nervous about this. I'm nervous about this. As if other fan bases aren't looking at their team and going, I'm nervous about this. You know, if you're Seattle tonight, and I think the Mariners have a fantastic fan base. I love their team. I love some of the stars they have. They have an excellent rotation. But their fans are looking at their group and going, where's the offense? This offense has struggled all year long. They were bottom of the league for a chunk of time. Can you trust this offense to catch fire in the final 40 games and come back from a 4-game deficit, a 5-game deficit? For Boston, I think Boston and the Royals are very equivalent. We saw that at Kauffman Stadium, and we saw that at Fenway Park, but the Red Sox got the best of the Royals. Issue is for Boston, which Red Sox fans are likely thinking now, how are we going to do this thing if our bullpen's this bad? The worst ERA in the second half so far. And our rotation isn't as solid as it once was. And every time that gap is closed between the Red Sox and Seattle and Kansas City, it takes like 2 or 3 games to get that lead back to where it was. So I look at these final 40 to 41 games, Royals in a really good spot, and they enter this weekend with a fantastic opportunity to really, over the next 6 or 7 games, get a cushy lead to a kick your feet up and relax with your hands on the back of your head type of lead, where you're not worried about the next game as much as you were on Wednesday, right? Hey, you want to win every single one of these games, but you have a 5-game lead. It's not do or die time. And the longer that lead stays there, the more those games start to dwindle away and less chances Boston and Seattle have of making ground. The Royals, Red Sox, and Mariners do not see each other the rest of the year. So it's going to come down to them winning and the Royals losing to make up that ground. It's as simple as I can make it. Boston had a great opportunity to leapfrog Kansas City at Kauffman Stadium. Didn't happen. Now they're 2.5 back with a really good Baltimore team. Still waiting to play them for 3 more games this weekend. Seattle heads to Pittsburgh, a team that is the worst in baseball over the last 10 games because they've lost 10 in a row. But they're also really due, and Paul Skeens on the bump. And the Royals, they get a good Reds team, but a Reds team that's under 500, and then an Angels team that is well below 500, and they get them at home with Cole Reagans and Seth Lugo and Michael Lorenzen, I believe it is, throwing in those games, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it'll go Lugo, Reagans, and Lorenzen Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday against the Angels. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show, but before we do that, thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Pat Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we come back, let's preview this upcoming series against the Cincinnati Reds. That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. 2 sponsors I want to give a little bit of love to is PrizePicks and Liquid IV, but let's kick things off with PrizePicks. And the baseball playoffs are coming up, and we got college football just 2 weeks away, at least here locally. And we know the NFL is right around the corner. Preseason football actually coming this Saturday. I'll be doing the Red and Gold postgame show on 810 WHB and postgame all season long. So check me out over there. But if you're into betting, why not head over to PrizePicks and start making some fun bets today and winning some money? Because PrizePicks can allow you to pick certain stats out there and see if they hit during the game. And it's so fun to use. It keeps you engaged with the game. We really always love showing the love and support for PrizePicks because when you head over there, you download the app, you're going to have a great time with it and be more invested in those games. So download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. Also want to tell you about Liquid IV, and I just got back from some beer league softball, and it was 85, 90 degrees, but it felt like there was humidity from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. It never really went away. It felt like I was in a rainforest. So naturally, when I get home, I'm thirsty. I need to get hydrated, but 1 bottle of water isn't always going to do it. I need to probably go and get my Liquid IV so I can put that in a bottle of water, and it's worth 3 or 4 bottles. And I feel much more hydrated before I go to bed. I don't feel like I got a headache anymore. I don't feel completely worn out. And yeah, it's beer league softball, but it doesn't matter whether you're working out, you're at the office. Liquid IVs are good for you, and they keep you hydrated so you don't deal with those headaches that I always get, or you don't feel fatigued and exhausted. So you can get 20% off your first order when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB. That's 20% off your first order when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB. So the series starts tomorrow at Great American Ballpark. Michael Lorenzen will be making his return there in a Royals uniform, at least. I believe he's returned there to Cincinnati since leaving the Reds a number of years ago. But he's going to be the starter on Friday night. First pitch again will be at 5:40 p.m. Central Time, and it will be Nick Martinez on the bump for the Cincinnati Reds. And he's been really, really good over the last 7 games. Now, a mixture of throwing in relief and also starting. So he's got 2 starts in those last 7 games. But get these numbers. He's 3-0 with a 0.39 ERA in 23 innings, has allowed only 16 hits. He's walked only 1 and struck out 22 for a whip of 0.74. So Nick Martinez has certainly been on one over the last, week or so, or probably 2 weeks, because it's that mixture of pitching in relief and also starting a handful of games. But on August 10th in Milwaukee, he was absolutely stellar. You can't get much better than this. He threw 7 shutout innings, I should say, allowed just 1 hit, struck out 7, didn't walk anybody. And that was after 5 days before that, he threw 5 innings, shut out again, 5 shutout innings against the Marlins, allowed only 4 hits, struck out 5, walked nobody. So Nick Martinez has just been dominant, over the last, I can go back as far as July 2nd, right? And this is fascinating to me because the Reds made this decision to start him just in the last two times out, August 5th and August 10th. He was pitching in relief against the Giants on August 2nd, and he had not started all season, he'd started at the beginning of the year, March 31st, against the Nationals and then against the Mets, but it wasn't a very good start to the year for him. He gave up 3 earned runs in 5 innings on March 31st and then 5 runs in 5 innings against the Mets. So then he goes on in relief and for the most part hangs around in April, was a little better in May, then was okay-ish in June, a 3.21 ERA, and then just turned things on in July, a 1.62 ERA in 8 games, and then he's been fantastic in the month of August, had that, 1 relief outing against the Giants, but then in back-to-back starts was everything they could have hoped for and more, and especially against the Brewers when you've got 7 innings and allowed just 1 hit, about as good as you could be. So the Royals are going to have their hands full with Nick Martinez. Not much of a strikeout guy, only threw 91 innings this year, but of course, because a lot of it came out of the bullpen. But he struck out only 75 guys in 91 innings this year, and he's never really been a strikeout pitcher, just 513 strikeouts and over 720 innings in his big league career. As for Saturday, it'll be Nick Lodolo going for the Reds, a very talented left-hander, against Michael Wacha, who's just been absolutely nails since that start against the Angels in Anaheim. He had that rough outing against Texas, and since then, Michael Wacha has been basically what he was last year. And what's funny is Michael Wacha had a rough April in San Diego, and then just went on this tear of, I think it was 15 or 16 quality starts. He finished with a 3.2 something ERA. And this year, it wouldn't shock me if he gets back down to that. He's had 21 games this year, already thrown 121 innings. His next strikeout would be his 100th this year, and a 3.50 ERA. You go over his last 7 starts, a 2.74 ERA. He went 7 innings last time out, just 2 runs against the Cardinals. I thought he really battled in that outing and was very impressive. Had 6 innings, a 2-run ball against Detroit, and then 7 innings, a 2-run ball against the White Sox. And he faced the White Sox 3 times in 2024. And it's not hard to put away that lineup, but he did his job every single time out. And that's what you can say about Michael Wacha. He takes the ball every 5th day and just kicks ass. As for Nick Lodolo, this could be a troublesome matchup, I believe, for the Royals because he is a really wicked strikeout left-handed pitcher. Not a soft tosser. I think he can run it up anywhere from 95 to 96. I think he's been really good in his last 2 outings. He faced the Marlins in Milwaukee like Nick Martinez. Gave up 3 runs and 5 1/3. Only struck out 4, but before that against the Marlins, struck out 7 over 6 innings and gave up just 2 runs. ERA on the year at 3.99. He's won 9 games in those 19 outings he's had all season long. So Lodolo is a guy I like coming out of the draft not too long ago, but I think he's one of those tough matchups for the Royals. And then on Sunday, you look at the 12:40 first pitch there at Great American Ballpark to close out the series. It'll be Brady Singer looking to bounce back from his really rough outing against the Minnesota Twins. And it will be Andrew Abbott going for the Reds, a 25-year-old, a guy that has thrown more innings than Nick Martinez and Nick Lodolo. But like Nick Martinez, not much of a strikeout guy, just 110 strikeouts and 133 innings. He has not been as efficient over the last 7 starts or so. He was good against St. Louis back on August 12th, so that wasn't too much longer ago. That was earlier this week, and gave up 1 run in 6 2/3. But he did get roughed up against Miami and didn't work that deep into the game against the Giants on August 2nd. Gave up 2 runs, 7 hits, and 4 1/3. So not really sure what version you're going to be getting of Andrew Abbott on Sunday, but hopefully at that point, the Royals have taken the first 2 games, and you're not worrying about a rubber match or trying to hold off a sweep on that Sunday afternoon game. Again, first pitch of 12:40. So I believe this is the first time the Royals have been at Great American Ballpark since I want to say 2021 or 22. Last year, the Reds were here in Cincinnati, so I want to say it was 2022 when they last were at Great American Ballpark. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but I do remember a COVID series against Cincinnati that was dramatic from game 1 to the final game. There was Ryan McBroom hitting late pinch hit home runs, and Mike Matheny giving fist pumps in the dugout after a game-ending double play hit by Christian Colon. I don't know why that COVID series stands out. And then I remember back in 2015, Ben Zobrist having a go-ahead home run off of Aroldis Chapman. So always a gorgeous ballpark to play, and exciting one at that, because the Royals don't visit them that often. But I have to go back and look if it was 2022 or 2021 the last time the Royals had visited Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati. But tomorrow, first pitch of 5:40, Michael Lorenzen against Nick Martinez. That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jack Johnson. Before we say goodbye for the last time, thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tomorrow, it'll be a Mailbag Friday. I'll be sending out the tweet in the morning time, and we'll get that episode out to you before the game. Again, a first pitch at 5:40. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.